Today, I want to take you back to around 3000 BC to understand where the money originated from, the problem that money was actually trying to solve. And while at it, let's talk about how money had shaped the modern psychology and philosophy of the world. So, somewhere in Mesopotamia, around 3000 BC, a farmer walks into the market with a basket of grains on his back. He needs sandals. His feet are cracked. The journey here took 3 hours. He finds the sandal maker, he holds up his grain, and the sandal maker shakes his head. He doesn't need grain, he needs copper to make more tools, to make more sandals. The farmer has no copper. So the farmer walks to another stall. He trades his grains for figs, walks to another, trades figs for clothes, walks to another, trades clothes for copper. Now he goes back to the sandal maker and the sandal maker nods. The sandals change hand. That sequence, grain to figs, figs to clothes, clothes to copper, and copper to sandals. Economists have a name for it. They call it the problem of double coincidence of wants. And for 200 years, they told us it was the reason money was invented. They were wrong. But the more important question is, what did we lose when we decided that story was true? Now, I want to tell you a story of a village. Let's call it fictional, though everything that happens in it is drawn from real anthropological fieldwork across dozens of traditional communities studied over the last century. In this village, there is no market, there is no money, there is no barter, and yet somehow everything works. When a fisherman catches more fish than his family can eat, he doesn't set up a stall. He doesn't negotiate. He walks to his neighbor's house and leaves the fish at the door. When the rains fail and the farmer's crop is thin, the village feeds him, not as charity, not as a loan, but as a matter of course. When a young woman falls ill and cannot work for a month, the community's work simply redistributes without a meeting, without a ledger, without anyone asking what she'll give back. This is not generosity in the way we use the word today. It isn't even kindness exactly. It is something older, something that doesn't have a clean translation in modern English. The French anthropologist Marcel Mauss spent his life studying communities like this one. And in 1925, 100 years ago, he wrote something that economists are still uncomfortable with. The major transfer of goods across all of recorded human civilization has been by cycles of obligatory gift exchange, not barter, not money, not trade. In these communities, the gift was never truly free, but it was also never truly calculated. When the fisherman left fish at his neighbor's door, he wasn't keeping score. He wasn't mentally noting 2 kilos of yellowfin, redeemable at a future date for goods or services of equivalent value. He was doing something that made him part of his community. Something that said, I exist in relation to you, my surplus is yours, and your need is mine. And here's the thing that Moss found so striking, the thing that economics textbooks missed entirely. This system worked for thousands of years, across hundreds of cultures, on every continent, before money was invented and long after it. The village didn't have a barter problem. It didn't need money to solve a problem. It didn't have. What it had instead was something money cannot replicate, something barter cannot generate, and something our modern world has nearly forgotten how to make. It had a web of obligation, a living network of IOU, not recorded in any ledger, but felt in every interaction, carried in the body, woven into every relationship in the village. And then, slowly over centuries, that web was replaced by the price tag. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This sounds like nostalgia, a romantic fantasy of the noble past. Surely the gift economy was messy, unequal, sometimes coercive. Surely money made things fairer, cleaner, and more efficient. And you would be right on all of that. Money is a genuine technology. It solved real problems. I'm not here to argue that we should go back. But here's a question that I can't stop thinking about. When money replaced the gift, it didn't just change how we traded goods, it changed how we understand value itself. And somewhere along the way, quietly without anyone deciding it, we started applying the logic of the market to the things the market was never designed to touch: our time, our attention, our relationships, and our love. We started bartering, not grain for sandals, but something far more precious. We started bartering ourselves. In 1776, Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations. It is one of the most influential books ever written, and it contains a story about the origins of human exchange that has shaped the economic thinking for 250 years. Smith said, imagine a primitive man who makes arrows, another who farms. They want to trade, but the double coincidence of wants makes us hard. So eventually, people agree on a common commodity like salt or metal or shells, and that becomes money. Barter first, then money, then credit, then the modern economy. A clean, logical progression. There is just one problem: it never happened. Cambridge anthropologist Caroline Humphrey, after decades of fieldwork across dozens of cultures, wrote in 1985 what is now one of the most quoted sentences in the economic anthropology. No example of a barter economy, pure and simple, has ever been described, let alone the emergence from it of money. All available ethnography suggests there never has been such a thing. David Graeber, the anthropologist who spent his career demolishing this myth, put it even more directly. He said if you went back in time to a prehistoric village and asked them how they solved the coincidence of wants problem, they'd look at you very strangely. What do you mean? They'd say, my neighbor has grain. I need grain. He gives it to me. I owe him one. That's all. The fundamental unit of ancient commerce was not the barter transaction. It was the IOU, the obligation and the relationship. And here is what makes this more than just an interesting history lesson. The story that Adam Smith told, even though it was false, became the founding myth of modern economic life. We built an entire civilization on a story about how humans naturally trade goods for maximum self interest. And then, because that's what civilization does, we started living as though the story were true. The philosopher Karl Marx had a term for what happens when the logic of the marketplace starts bleeding into the areas of life it was never meant to govern. He called it commodity fetishism, the tendency to see everything as having a price, including things that shouldn't. But Marx was writing in the 1800s. He couldn't have imagined quite how thorough this process would become. Think about how we talk about our time now. We don't spend time with people, we invest time. We don't give our attention to things we care about. We allocate our attention. We don't love someone, we put in the work on a relationship. Psychology Today published research just last year documenting what researchers are calling the transactionalization of modern relationships. The central question people now bring to romantic partnerships isn't, do I love this person? But what does this person bring to the table? Let that phrase sit for a moment. What do you bring to the table? A table is where you negotiate. A table is where deals are made. A table is where two parties sit across from each other, each trying to extract the best possible terms. We have imported the logic of the medieval grain market into the most intimate parts of our life. And we don't even notice it anymore because the language is everywhere. Networking events where you make connections the way you would make trades, friendships evaluated by what they offer, children treated as life decisions to be optimized, self improvement as an investment in your personal brand. The German philosopher Gunther Anders called this the throwaway mentality. And he warned 50 years ago that it wouldn't stay confined to the objects, that eventually humans themselves would be evaluated by the same logic we use to evaluate goods: utility, exchange value, and replaceability. We are living inside that warning now. But here is where I want to go somewhere most people don't take this argument because it's easy and also somewhat cheap to point at capitalism and say it made us cold and transactional. True enough. But Mauss was making a more subtle point than that. He wasn't saying the gift economy was perfect. It wasn't. Those villages had hierarchies, they had coercion, the obligation to give and to receive. and to reciprocate could be manipulated, weaponized, used to create dependency. What Moss was pointing at was something about the nature of value itself. In a gift economy, the value of an exchange isn't determined at the moment of exchange, it lives in time. The fisherman leaves fish at his neighbor's door today, not knowing when or how the favor will return, or if it will return as a favor at all. It might come back as help building a house, as someone sitting with him when he falls sick, as a story told about him after he dies. The gift creates a relationship that extends through time. Its value is fundamentally open. It cannot be calculated in advance because it is not designed to. The transaction is the opposite. It is designed to close. Money is what allows a transaction to be complete. Nothing owed, nothing open. The ledger is balanced. You hand over your coins, you get your sandals, and you walk away. No relationship created, no obligation formed, no thread connecting you to the person across the counter. Efficiency, cleanliness, freedom, and also disconnection. The objects are never completely separated from the man who exchanged them. The gift is forever bound to the giver. Think about what that means. That the thing you give carries something of you inside it. That exchange is not the transfer of an object, but the extension of a relationship. Now, think about what we have built instead. A world in which the entire design intention is to separate the object from the person, to strip meaning from the exchange, to make it clean, fast, impersonal, and complete. Amazon Prime, 2-day delivery, no conversation required, the efficiency is breathtaking, and so is the loneliness. Now, let's go back to the village. The fisherman who left the fish at his neighbor's door, he didn't know what he'd get back or when. He didn't even know if the concept of getting back was how he thought about it. He left the fish because he had extra, because his neighbor was his neighbor, because the kind of person he wanted to be in his community, in his own eyes, was a person who left the fish at the door when he had an extra. The philosopher Emmanuel Levinas spent his career trying to describe what he called the face of the other, the irreducible reality of another human being that makes a claim on you simply by existing in front of you. Not a transaction partner, not a market participant, a face. Levinas argued that ethics, real ethics, not the kind written in textbooks, begins the moment you encounter another person and ask, what do I owe this person? Not what can I extract from them? What do I owe them? That question is ancient. It is pre economic. It is the question the fisherman answered every morning when he walked out of his house. And I think it is a question our modern world has quietly, systematically made it harder and harder to ask. Because the market has a very confident answer already prepared. You owe them nothing unless there is a contract, unless value has been exchanged, unless the terms have been agreed upon. That's the barter mentality, not the historical barter of grains for sandals, which, as we have seen, was not quite so clean as the story suggests, but something deeper, a way of moving through the world that treats every interaction as a potential exchange, every relationship as a balance sheet, every person as a portfolio of what they can offer. Now, here's the thing I want to sit with you on for a moment. That fisherman leaving fish at the door, he was not naive. He was not a saint. He lived in a community where that kind of generosity was the norm, and where failing to practice it carried social consequences. So you could say he was just following the incentives of his system. We are also following the incentives of our system. The difference is that our system has decided quietly without a vote that the only rational response to another human being is to calculate what they are worth to you. And I think we feel that. I think we feel the absence of the fish left at the door, the favor given without a ledger, the relationship that exists because it exists, not because it is useful. I think the loneliness epidemic is, at least in part, an economy of the soul running at a deficit. The barter system never really existed the way the textbooks said it did. But It's logic. The logic of equivalent exchange, of calculated reciprocity, of nothing given that isn't also taken. That logic is everywhere now, not in the market, in us. And the question is not whether we can go back to the village. We simply can't. The question is whether we can remember that the village was trying to answer something that market cannot answer. Not what is this worth, but what do I owe you simply because you are here and I am here and we are in this together. Now, think about this. What have you been bartering that maybe wasn't yours to trade?